Sarah served in Vietnam with the U.S. Army 1967 and 1968. She's gone on to write and research on areas about military women and PTSD, really important topics, and how wonderful to have it to be a part of her scholarship as well as something she wrestles with in her own life. So Sarah Blum, terrific to have you.
In Vietnam, because I was so short, I had to stand on a box when we were doing surgery. I don't have a box right now, but hopefully you can see me over this. Yeah, 12th Evac Hospital, Cu Chi, Vietnam. So I want to tell you about two of my initiations. A little bit different topic. When I landed in Vietnam, I landed where most of us did, at Bien Hoa Air Base. And it was about 120 degrees and the heat was really oppressive. I got off the airplane and I felt that oppressive heat and the smells that I would learn to experience throughout the year. Many of those pungent smells that just came up and hit me. And the first thing that happened was the Air Force put on a show for us because we were a plane load of nurses. It was very early in the early stages of the war. It was January of 1967. So they put on a show and they flew their jet planes back and forth and around, and they did their thing. And when all of that was done, then we were ordered to go find our duffel bag. And those of you that are nurses will remember this experience, because here we are with sweat pouring down our bodies in this incredible heat, and there on the tarmac are 200 OD green duffel bags. Find your bag. And there were a few women who were smart enough to put a colored ribbon on theirs, but I wasn't one of those, and so I was one. I think there may be 40 or 50 bags left when I finally found my bag. So then I went to 90th Replacement Battalion, and at the 90th Replacement Battalion, that's where we are given our assignments. So I was actually assigned to the 71st Evac at Play Q, which is where Diane Carlson Evans was stationed. But when I got there, it was not built yet. And so they changed my orders to go to the 85th Evacuation Hospital at Quy Nhon. And I was there to serve, and I wanted to be there for what I call my brothers. And so there was this young girl. I was 26, so I thought I was old, right? She was 19, and she was incredibly distraught because she was assigned to the 12th Evacuation Hospital at Cu Chi, and she apparently knew about it. I knew nothing about any of the hospitals at that time. So I went over to console her, find out why she was so upset. And she told me that she didn't want to go to Cu Chi because she was afraid, and she'd heard all these stories about it. And I said, well, what's your MOS? That's military occupational specialty. And so she and I have the same MOS. We were both operating room nurses. So I said, well, let's go to the chief nurse and see if we can change it. And so we went to the chief nurse and told her what was going on, and she literally switched our assignments right there. So that young girl went to the 85th at Quy Nhon, and I went to the 12th Evac at Cu Chi and had my amazing experiences there. And the first part of my amazing experience was that second initiation. I don't know if any of my sister Vietnam vets had this experience, but I did. So I'm on the helicopter, and you know, there's no doors on these things. And so that was my first, like, oh my gosh. So I sat in the middle seat. So the doors are way over there, right? And they took me to Cu Chi. And when I got to Cu Chi, they're over the helipad. They're over it, and I'm going down, and they went, no, and I, down, no, and they said, you go. And so they made me jump out of the helicopter. It was about maybe 6 or 7 feet. And I had my, a ukulele with me. It's a baritone ukulele, so it's a good size ukulele in a leather case. So I'm jumping out of the helicopter onto the helipad with my baritone ukulele. And then, as they're flying up, I said, where do I go? I'm in this desolate area. All I see are a few little haunted huts and everything desolation. Where do I go? So they pointed to a building that was headquarters. I went over there to the headquarters building, and inside this building is this, those of you that are military are going to get this very, very, very strack executive officer. I mean, the crease is amazing, the side crease, right? And he is about as strack as you can get, and I am not that. And so Lieutenant Blum reporting for duty, and then he said to me, "What's in that case?" And I thought, I didn't know him yet, right? And so I thought I would just say something funny. And so I said, "Well, it's a machine gun. I thought I might need it over here." Well, that was the wrong thing to say to that guy. And so for 20 minutes, he, chewed me out, upside down, inside out, round and round, all. I tried to avoid him for the rest of the time I was at the 12th Evac, but that was my initiation to the 12th Evacuation Hospital. So, now to the serious stuff. So, my hospital was a Coochie, and we were beside the Hobo Woods, on the edge of the Iron Triangle. And if you know anything about the history of the Vietnam War, that's where all the fighting was at that point in time. And so we had mass casualties all the time. We were an evacuation hospital, but we functioned as a MASH hospital because we constantly had casualties coming in. My hospital was the largest user of fresh blood in all of Vietnam during the year that I was there. So that tells you a lot. There are panels and panels and panels and panels of names on the wall from that year that I spent there. So what did we do? So we would get casualties in, and they had wounds all over their bodies. Incredible wounds in that war. These are 19-year-old boys that are being hurt in these ways. Their bodies mutilated, mangled, the worst of the worst. And so they would come into the operating room, and I learned right away that I was going to be doing, as a nurse, as a surgical nurse, I was going to be doing the same thing that the surgeons were doing. So the first thing that happened is the surgeon says, "Okay, do you want the right side or the left side?" "Sir?" And so that's how it went. And so I did the same thing that the surgeons did. So what we did was we would look at the wounds. First, they'd all be cleaned and washed and shaved, all the hair shaved around them. And then we look in the wound, and we find all the metal, the shrapnel, the bullets, whatever's in there. We take that out. We test the tissues, the muscles, to find out what's alive and what's not. And we take everything out that's not alive. Everything that's dead comes out. And then we wash all those wounds with normal saline solution, wash them out continuously, and then we bandage them, and then they go to the recovery room. And then from recovery room, they go to one of the wards. And in our hospital, it would have been B6, B7, B8. And then the nurses around the clock, every 4 hours, they're going to rinse those wounds out with normal saline, and then they're going to rebandage them, and they're going to give them antibiotics every 4 hours around the clock for 3 days. All war wounds are considered dirty. They learned that in World War I, that if you close up a war wound and you don't do what I just described to you, they will get gangrene and they will not survive it. So that's what we do, and then on the third day, they come back in for what we call a DPC, which is delayed primary closure. So then on the third day they come back, and then we're closing up all those wounds that we opened up. Let's see, what else do I want to tell you about? So Coochie is on top of 200 miles of tunnel. The tunnels ran from Saigon to Coochie, And they knew everything that we were doing whenever we were doing it. And I kept telling the guys in intelligence that that was what was happening. They weren't paying any attention to what I was telling them, but that was really happening. And so outside of the operating room, about the distance to our beautiful, awesome memorial, was a tunnel opening. And so I would take whenever we had to throw things from the operating room down, like the blood of my brothers, I would throw it down the tunnel opening and yell things down there, and that's kind of how I dealt with all the feelings that I had about what was happening. Throw it down there. But I want to tell you that I lived in fear, terror, that the VC were going to come up through that tunnel opening and they were going to booby trap our little outhouse that was just right across, like where that bench is. That's where our outhouse was. And there was the tunnel opening. And I lived in fear that they were going to booby trap that outhouse and that I was going to be the one to trip it. Not only would it blow me up, but it would blow up our operating room. So that was one of the fears that I lived with. And so instead of risking that, most of the time I ran the long, long run all the way over to the hooch and to the other outhouse that was behind our hooch. So I want to tell you also about my first mortar attack. Was kind of like another initiation. So I was there about maybe 2 weeks when we had our first mortar attack. And our bathrooms, our showers are three-sided. So we have, it's wooden sides, three sides. And then we have this stream of water coming down from the big receptacle that's on the top of the hooch that carries the water. And so it comes down in a small stream. And so what you do in the military is you wet your body down, turn the water off because you got to conserve that water, and then soap up, and then you rinse. So I was just getting ready to rinse the soap off when I heard this sound I'd not heard before. It was a whistle, whoo, thud, boom, right? Yeah, anybody know that sound? And so I heard that sound, but I didn't know what it was yet. So I rinsed, right? Started rinsing, and next thing I know, there is a young soldier standing in the opening to the shower because there's only three sides, right? So there he is, rinsing off, and he's in full battle gear. He got his flak jacket on, his helmet on, he's got his rifle, and it's in front of him. And he said, "Ma'am, we're being mortared. You need to go to the bunker." And I said, "Okay." And so I wanted to rinse the soap off, right? And so he said, "Ma'am, if you don't go right now, I'm going to carry you there." So I said, "Okay." So I turned that little thing off, and I put on, the only thing I had with me was my little shorty robe, and of course I was all wet and soapy, so I went slip sliding through the hooch to get to the bunker that I'd never been in, and I go out of the hooch, and of course it's bright sun, right? Bright sun, and I go into the hooch, and it's total dark. Can't see a thing, going from the bright sun to total dark. Fortunately, there was somebody inside that knew the experience and grabbed my hand and guided me to a bench to sit down on. And I sat down on the bench. I looked across. Once my eyes adjusted, I looked across, and there was my chief nurse in flak jacket and helmet. I'm in my little shorty robe that's all wet now. And she announces to all of us, "We'll stay here till the all clear comes, and then you go back to what you were doing." And I thought, okay. So, and then no sooner did she finish that sentence, another soldier pops his head into the bunker and he said, "We need Lieutenant Blum in the OR right now." So I looked over at her and she went like this. And so, you know what I did, right? I went back in, rinsed all the soap off, and now I had mud all over my legs from the bunker. So I rinsed off, dried as fast as I could. I hopped into my fatigues and sprinted to the OR while the mortars were coming in. And I mean, I could see them, smell them, hear them, but I had to get to my job in the OR, and that's what I did. That was my sole focus. So I want to tell you about my last day. I don't know how many of you had this experience on your last day, but so we're back at Benoit Air Base, and the day before my last day, they hit Benoit Air Base, and they really hit it hard. And so here we all are leaving the next day, and of course, we're terrified that it's going to get hit again. And so we're all lined up. Here's all of us, all Vietnam vets. We had just spent a year in Vietnam, and we're all lined up like sitting ducks on the tarmac. And everybody, guys, gals, all of us were really terrified that we made it this far, 365 days, right? We made it this far, and then bam, we're going to get it right there on the tarmac, going ready to go home. That didn't happen, or I wouldn't be here talking to you, right? So we all made it. But I want to tell you what happened. So we all got on the airplane, and I don't know how many of the rest of you might have had this experience, but we got on the airplane, and I'm telling you that once that airplane started to lift off, you heard every single one of us on the airplane was sucking air, was going like we were holding our breath the whole time until it lifted off, and then everybody could take a breath and breathe, because we were going home. So the last thing I want to tell you is that for the last 7 years, I've been reading everything that I could read about what's been happening to women in the military service. And I can tell you that I've discovered in all of that there is a culture of abuse toward women in the military. Oh, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. It's wonderful. So there is a culture of abuse toward women in the military, and it is destroying the health, lives, and careers of valuable women soldiers, and it's got to stop. And so I interviewed 58 women veterans from World War II all the way up to Iraq and Afghanistan, and I've just completed a book that's going to be published within the next couple of weeks. It'll be out. It's called Women Under Fire, Abuse in the Military, and there's a website, and the website is womenunderfire.net, and I really want to encourage you all to go to the website, see what's on there, and if you're so inclined to order the book there. And support our cause to restore honor to our military in this regard, and to bring justice to women that are serving in the military now, and those that have already served and experienced that kind of sexual assault. So thank you all for listening, and to all of my brother and sister veterans, thank you for your service.
We come to our last storytellers. And if you, for some reason, lost sunglasses, Tortoise,